revolution and legitimation. That's the title of what we're going to be considering. And today, I'm going to start off the lectures on this topic. We have 4 different aspects of law revolution and legitimation. So what we are going to consider today, because this class is jurisprudence, and what that means in a sense some minutes ago, I did start the lectures by reeling out what we are expected to do today, and also this week and the coming week. And I did say that we are going to be talking about law revolution and legitimation. These are very great concepts in constitutional law, but also have a legal backing in jurisprudence, because in jurisprudence, we consider concepts. We look at words, we look at meanings, and then most often we try to put a case to those concepts by looking at case law. So this week and next week, possibly, we will be examining law revolution and legitimation. And before I was cut off, I was trying to say that I was going to start by defining what law is, what revolution is, and what legitimation is. I do not need to define law again, because we will be going back and forth, and in a way, that is going to be tautology. But I could make an attempt to define revolution. And in defining revolution, most times I will like to go through a dictionary definition of revolution. Because revolution, we do hear a lot of revolution these days in Nigeria, and so we may wonder what that means. But Oxford Dictionary defines revolution as a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system. I take that again. It says, the Oxford Dictionary of English says, revolution is a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system. The country has had a socialist revolution. A good example of revolution, it's what happened on November 17, 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution, in which Karl Marx and his friends overthrew the monarchy in Russia and established a communist enclave, although that communist enclave has since been put down. Cambridge Dictionary defines revolution as a change in the way a country is governed, usually to a different political system, and often comes through violence or war. And it gives a good example of the French Revolution, because the French Revolution came through war, and it was violent. They also did not, they were aghast against the monarchy, and so in 1789, there was a violent overthrow of monarchy in France. And we now have what we call the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. For those of us who may have offered human rights, I hope that we were told, about that as well. And then we will also define legitimation, which, well, Cambridge Dictionary says it is the act or result of making something legitimate. I think that hasn't defined it, because when we make a definition of a word, we try not to use that word as part of its definition. So I think I will look at another definition which says that it is the process of making something acceptable, and it is a normative to a group or audience. And so, so when we talk about legitimation, it is the power or the right to exercise control over things or over people. So all the things I've said in few minutes, law, revolution, and legitimation, you might just be wondering, where are we going in all this? We needed to lay the foundation of law, revolution, and legitimation, because we're going further to look at stability and change. So we must understand what revolution is all about, which is the forcible overthrow of government. And then what makes that government, what makes it legitimate? It is a process. It is a process which is acceptable, to all and sundry. It is a process, because if a coup is staged and the people do not accept the coup, it means that legitimacy is withdrawn. That's what it means. And when legitimacy is withdrawn, then you find that there is bound to be problem. When legitimacy is withdrawn, it means that everything that we've been doing it's nothing. It means that everything that we've been doing, we've just been wasting time. So the idea that we must have legitimacy for what we're doing is basic to our discussion. So when we look at law, which is the accepted rule, which is the accepted conduct in a society, when we look at it, is the accepted rule, the accepted conduct in society. And then, how is law sustained? Law is sustained through legitimation. That's how law is sustained. But more than often, law can only be sustained by stability. And what do we mean by that? We mean that a society is stable. It means that a society can be predicted. It means that the course of law can be predicted. We can say that if we have an issue and we go before the court of law, we are likely to have respite. That's what we're saying, that when we go to a court of law, we are likely to have respite. That's what we're saying. So when we talk about law and stability, we need to be able to say that, please, can you mute yourself? Please, can you, Oresoya Oluwateniola, can you mute yourself? You're disturbing the class. So when we talk about stability, what we're saying in essence is that that society is predictable, that judicial system is predictable. We can say that if we have issues, there is a way it will go. We can say that if there are problems, there are ways that we can go about it and it's going to work. We can say that. So we can say that this is what we're likely to do, and this is what we're going to do. So when we look at society, and when we look at stuff in the society, we're bound to believe that the society is likely to give us things that we need to look forward to. Because in a society that has anarchy, we're not likely to gain anything from a society that has anarchy. So for law to function in a proper manner, we need to have stability. And so it is the stability in the law that helps, in the functioning of the society. Because when there is no stability within the law, then when there is no stability in a society, then we really do have issues. We have issues when we don't have stability. So it means that whatever we might want to do, we might not be able to do it because there is no stability. And so, what makes a society to be stable? In this, we might be going into a bit of constitutional law, in the sense that for a society to be stable, of course, we must have a constitution, we must have a form of law in which the people in the society look up to, and it's the guiding principle of their life. And besides that, that, what else do we also need in a society? We need a government, and government comes in through elections. So these indices makes us to know that we need a constitution, we need a government, we need a judiciary, we need the press. So these are indices that we need for stability in the society. But when we look at law, how does law reinforce stability? That's a question we also need to consider. How does law reinforce stability? Because it's not enough for us to mouth that we have law. There is a function of law in the society, and it is that function of law in the society that makes stability, to be in that society. And so for us in this class, when we look at law, we must look at law in a wider perspective. We must look at law from the prism, the fact that without law, there will be anarchy in society. And for a society now to be stable, there are certain indices, certain instrumentalities that operates within the society that makes the society to be stable. But the question I'm going into now is, why change? Because we're talking about law, stability, and change. Why change? Why do we need to have change? Why? If the society is stable, if everything is going on well, why should we have change? So these are the questions we need to consider. But I just want to stop now and ask whether there is anyone that has a question before I go further. Does anyone have a question before I go further? Does anyone have a question?
Good morning, ma.
Morning.
Ma, I didn't get what you said when you were talking about how law reinforce stability. I don't know if you could come again on that, ma.
Okay, can I correct your English? In this
Oh,
kind of a class, if you didn't get what I'm saying, all you need to say is, can you repeat yourself, or pardon? Come again is a bedroom language. It's not a language of the class. Is that okay?
yes, ma. Thank you, ma.
Okay. So can I now get what you don't understand that I said? Can I get what you don't understand that I said?
I was having a network issues at the time you were explaining that, so I didn't get anything you said at all.
Okay. I was trying to explain what stability is. That's what I'm trying to, or I started by trying to talk about law, revolution, and legitimation. So that's what I was trying to do. And in that, I tried to read out some definitions, of what um, uh, dictionaries have said, you know. So I try to read. So maybe what I will say now is that if you have an access to a dictionary, please look at the definition of revolution, which when I read both the Oxford and the Cambridge definition of revolution, the two are saying virtually the same thing, which is it is a forceful takeover of government. It's a forceful takeover of government. So that's what it is saying. And then when I went into legitimation, we had an issue there in the sense that Cambridge was still defining the word legitimation, and it was also using the word legitimation. And I know by rule that when you want to define a word, you cannot, use that same word, to in the midst of the definition. You have to define the words in such a way, that he doesn't have any connotation of the word. So, of course, when we were looking at legitimation, we're looking at process, and system, in which society, gives credence to what happens in a society. I don't know if you can understand what I'm saying, because when we talk about legitimation, the society must agree, to what we were trying to do. Because if the society does not agree to what we're trying to do, it's most probably we will not be able to achieve it. We will not be able to achieve what we want to achieve. So in all cases, we must always have the acceptance of the society. I hope you understand what I'm saying now. Do you
Yes, ma'am.
understand what you? So if you don't understand, I can still go ahead, but I want to know whether you understand what I've just explained. Do you understand what I've just
I understand, ma'am.
explained?
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Okay, so we can now go forward in our discussion. What we're trying to say really has to do with what happens where law fails, because that's my own summation of it. Because for us to have what we call revolution, it means along the line, law has failed, because revolution will just not come if law hasn't failed. So it is the failure of law that in most cases brings about revolution, or generally the failure in the society, because in the society there is a certain expectation, that is expected by the citizens of the society. As you are a law student, you have an expectation, of Nigerian society. You do have an expectation. And when that expectation is not met, that is when we do have problems, and you find what political scientists will call disgruntled elements, and you find the disgruntled element. One of the things that we need to know is that revolution is always planned. Revolution is always planned. But how did we get, to that point? Somehow, fortunately for us, in the last 25 years, we have not witnessed a revolution. For people of my age and a little below, we have had martial music. We have had martial music. You just wake up in the morning and you hear martial music on the radio. And of course, the person announcing comes in and says that I, Brigadier so and so, on behalf of the military government, the constitution have been suspended, and a military regime has taken over, and so and it talks about decree something something something, and that's it. That kind of revolution is the revolution that has come through the military. But the revolution that for a long time people were familiar with was the revolution occasioned by Karl Marx and his friends, which is the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. Of course, that revolution has now died because Russia has departed from communism, and everybody is now a capitalist, But the question we might be asking, and which I'm going to be answering in subsequent lectures, is what really will make a revolution to be successful. I remember that in the time of the military, several jurists have said that citizens should stop giving legitimacy to them. And they say that, look, if the military comes up and talks about and makes their announcement, because they will always say they in many times they will say they have looked at stuff and they feel that there's a problem, and that and it is on the basis of that, that they have come to correct. In fact, invariably they talk about corruption. They talk about corruption, saying that it's because of corruption that they have come, and so, and they tell us that they have now come to put things in proper perspective, but we find out, at least for those of us who have lived over 50 years, we found out that they invariably do not, what they said that they have come to cure, they don't cure it. We find that the military itself has been a bastion of corruption, that there's a lot of corruption within the military. So we look at that, because they say that the reason why they have come is because there's corruption. But we find that and of course, people of my generation, because we witnessed so many coups, and we'll find that each each person, that talks about coup, each military regime, when it comes, talks about this, and invariably, when they leave and another military regime comes, that new military regime also still talks about corruption, So people of my generation, we definitely often ask ourselves whether the military is really correcting anything, whether that this idea that they're coming to correct may not be totally right, because we haven't seen them correct anything. So I've said all this because when we talk about, when we're talking about law stability and change, there must be a need for change because if there is no need for change, why are we, what are we saying if there is no, if there is no need for change? Because, so why are we having this? So this, all I have said so far this morning is to lay a foundation for us in considering law stability and change, because we have often agreed that there is a way that law keeps a society, because in fact, the thread that holds the society is law. Because when there's no law, it means that you could do anything. That's what it means. When there's no, you could do anything and you could get away with it. But we also know that it is impossible to do anything and get away with it when the law is functioning and there's a stable society. And let me also say, when we talk about stability of society, it is impossible for the government to satisfy all of us. I hope we'll bear that in mind, that it is impossible for the government to satisfy all of us, because invariably we always look forward to government, and we feel that government must satisfy us. But it is impossible for government to satisfy everyone. What government needs to do is to do things in such a way, that at least majority of people will, what we need to know is a majority of people will just have a kind of life that they can say, oh, this is it. At least they will have basic things of life. That they will have basic things of life. But we'll find that most times, what would be a catalyst? Let me use that word. What will be a catalyst is that things are not going the way majority wants. And because things are not going the way majority wants, then the recourse is that there should be a change, And when we talk about change, what type of change are we talking about, when we talk about change? So this lecture this morning, I'm just trying to lay foundation for what we're going to do next week, because it is the next week that we're going to go full blast into the discussion. But now I'm just giving us like a snippet of what we're going to be discussing. And I also would like that before that day, we also read up on revolution, because that reading up on revolution will, in a way, give us an idea, on what I'm saying. Because the long and short of the story I'm trying to tell this morning is that there is a function of law in a stable society. But it is when that function of law fails, that change comes. But how does change come? What brings change? What is the catalyst for change? And how is change maintained? That's all I'm saying this morning. But next week, we'll go into law, stability, and change and begin to discuss other issues that relate to it. I'm also going to stop now because I'm also thinking that maybe some folks may have questions they will ask. So does anybody have questions?
Good morning, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning.
Not necessarily a question, but my way of comments to to this discussion, ma'am.
Okay.
Hello, ma'am. We know that, thank God, revolution simply means forceful change of a government or not following the normal procedure to effect change in government. But it is an established fact that it's the dominant minority in a society that imposes its views on the majority of the society. When I say dominant minority, for instance, even in the military government, is those who have conspired, let me use that word, to effect a change in government. I will actually bring up their ideas. And in a democracy, man, yes, we have our representatives because we are giving them the powers to go and represent us. But absolutely, they may not generally represent what we as a people stand for. So the issue of change will be as defined by those in government at a given time. Yes, legitimacy will easily be established if there's a general discontent by the citizens of the society. So it's a very interesting topic, man, that within the realms of jurisprudence or so, that can be expatiated and enjoyed as you develop this topic, man.
Maybe where I will sort of disagree with you is that it's not always that the majority as it's the one that is it's the one that is calling the shots.
No,
I don't know.
the dominant minority, man.
The dominant minority. What are they? Let me get that. The dominant minority, what are they doing?
The dominant minority for a military government, for instance, are those who sat down to plan a coup and took over the government. So they give the bearing of what the government would do when on seat. In the case of democracy, they are not even up to 10,000 people, though we have elected them, but they still go there in the name, for instance, the National Assembly, and the executive represented by one man. In actual fact, for instance, in Nigeria now, all the people that are ruling us, that are giving the ideas, they are not up to 10,000 people. So we can call them as the dominant minority, over 200 million people as citizens.
When we talk, you're looking at revolution only from the perspective of the military. What will make the military to take over government? It is the disenchantment of the people. That's why I said people of my generation witnessed so many coups. And I remember in 1982 that the civilian government, especially in the southwest of the UPN, because of the programs they were doing, free education, free this, it got to a point they were not able to pay salaries. But they continued with their programs, but they weren't paying civil servants. And so life was tough for so many people. And that was why the military came in. So it's not so because there must be a certain indices that have broken down, you know. Why was there a revolution in Russia? A revolution came in Russia because the monarchy then, they were oppressive. If you a very good student of history, why did the people revolt in France? They revolted in France because what happened was, what happened in France when people were agitating, when citizens were agitating, Louis the 16th, instead of him to listen to the agitation of the people, he said he's the state. This was the distinction between Louis the 16th and the monarchy in England. The monarchy in England, they do listen to the yearnings of the people, and that's why we have the Bill of Rights of 1688. We had the Magna Carta of 1215, you know, because the monarchy in England will listen to the yearnings of the people, and that's why the monarchy is still strong. You may say they are ceremonial head of state because the parliament has taken over, but you can see that they too could have gone the way of Russia. They too also could have gone the way of France, but they're going that way because they were able to listen to the yearnings of the people. So revolution will come. Either way, either people's revolution, you know, or the one orchestrated by the military. But definitely something went wrong somewhere, and that is why a revolution comes in and is being led by whoever that is being led. Do we have other questions? Because we
Yes,
still
ma'am.
have.
Good
Yes.
morning, ma'am.
Morning.
You said the revolution that we are talking about today is not the military revolution, but the Bolshevik revolution of 1917.
No. Maybe you got that wrong. I am making an example of the People's Revolution. The one that happened in 1917 is the People's Revolution, but led by Karl Marx, you know, and they brought a new order. There is a distinction between that revolution, the people-led revolution, and the military-led revolution. That's the distinction I want you to get.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, ma.
Morning.
Yes, ma. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to ask, I really need a guide as to how you're expected to, when we're asked to comment on the difficulties of constructing a universal concept of justice. Ma, please, can you provide a guide on how we are going to go about it, how we are meant to write and hit the nail on the head without having to write irrelevant things, ma? Please, can you provide a guide on as to how we are to answer that question, ma?
Sister, we have gone past that one. You should have asked this question when we were doing law and justice, because this question
Yes,
will have to wait till after the lectures if we have time to go over what we're doing. Because right now what we're doing, and time is against us, is law, revolution, and legitimation. That's what we're doing. And that's what I want us to concentrate on, because next week we must conclude these lectures and somebody else will come in because exam is already knocking. I would say, because there is, you're a 500 level, there is a presumption of knowledge in your favor. For that, I would say that you go and do your research. You know, you go and do your research.
All right, ma'am.
So you can always do that research, and it will even be better if you do that research, because when you do research, you gain more and it stays with you.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
So do we have any other question?
Yes, ma. Good morning, ma.
Morning.
Yes, ma. In the last class, ma, you asked us to, you said we should go through a judgment of Obaseki in Nursery
Yes,
Brother and AG of Oyo's case, ma. But
yes.
the panel of judges that heard the case, ma, Obaseki was not there. It was Bello, Anagolu, Koka, Caribbean White, Kawu, Poputa, and Alpha Belgo, yes, that had the case, man. So
Okay,
I just
maybe,
wanted,
but that is okay. Thank you. But maybe I mixed up because there is a judgment of Obaseki that
yeah,
resonates with what those people talked about. Maybe that's where I mixed it up. But
I think it's you first, man.
sorry.
I said, when you finish what you are saying, I'll say what I want to say, man.
Yes, there's a judgment of Obaseki that resonates with the issue of justice. And maybe that's why I thought it's a long time that I've read the case, but it's a case that always I like to refer to. Maybe that's why I brought him in. But of course, Oputa is there. I said you should read Oputa. And then, of course, Caribbean White is there as well. But I think it's Kawu that wrote the lead judgment of. I'm not sure who wrote the lead judgment now, but at least
It was
you
Bello,
can
man.
read. Sorry?
It was Muhammad Bello, man, that read the lead judgment. He presided and
Okay,
read the lead judgment.
okay. But
Yes, man.
while I want you to read all those people's judgment, but I really wanted you to concentrate on Okuta. And I remember I mentioned Okuta and Obaseki, so which is still
Yes,
okay.
man.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very
I
much.
think the
Thank you
case
for
you are
pointing that out.
referring to is the case of Ojuku's case and military governor of Lagos State, because that's where
Esho
Obaseki.
is that. Yes, Esho is in that one. And that was where Esho
Yes, ma'am.
used the word executive lawlessness. I remember, I noted that one.
So it's not
Um,
that case, ma'am.
It's not that case, but there is a case that has to do with issue of justice that Obaseki made some comments on.
All right, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you too for pointing that out. Do we still have questions before we go to the last lap of the lecture? Do we still have lectures and do we still have questions? Okay, it seems we don't have questions. It seems that we're ruminating on what we've had. Well, so let me just do a recap and set the tone for what we're going to meet next week. Every society has a guiding principle, and that guiding principle is always the law. It is the law that is the guiding principle. And it has been agreed that law functions in every society. Not only does law function in every society, law is that glue, that thread that holds the society in cohesiveness, you know. But at times, society, despite law and despite some institutions, will yearn for change. And when they yearn for this change, the question before juries always is, why did they yearn for this change? What went wrong? Where did law miss it? Where did law not do well? What happened in such societies, that made, law, that made people to be insisting that they want change? Let me also say here that society can never be static. There is always a dynamism in society. And it is that dynamism in society that makes the society to be what it is. And because of the dynamism in society, then it means that everybody in that society is leaning against one thing or the other. And if they are leaning against one thing or the other, there's certain things that are expected of them. And there is, because from our legal method class, and even from, yes, from a legal method, we must have talked about this social contract theory. It is taught in legal method. It's also mentioned in constitutional law. There's this social contract theory propounded by John Locke and Montesquieu. With this social contract theory, there is an expectation of citizens with the society. There is a kind of expectation that is expected. And because of that expectation, then when those expectations don't come to, then there are problems. Because take, for example, a lot of people talk about Nigeria as a failed state. And what do they mean by that? They say everybody is now a local government. You generate your light, your water, your waste, and everything. What are they? Because I know that in this Lagos, water corporation was working, water corporation was going into homes, but now everybody has borehole. And this is because water corporation is not working. I don't know houses where they still have water corporation, but I know that majority of the people majority of households have borehole. And they also, and in fact, now people are generating their own light through solar. They now have solar inverter. So these are the issues that most times resort into citizens being disenchanted with governance. And when citizens are disenchanted with governance, they begin to ask, they begin to make demand. And when those demands don't come, as it ought to, or whether the government is trying to not listen to the yearnings of the people, that is when there could be a forceful takeover of government, a forceful one, because you just find that you just find that people are not, they're disenchanted, and there is a clamor, for change, and when there's a clamor for change, you find that before you know it, it comes to pass, because there's a clamor for change. So for us in this class, as lawyers, because law is that tool that we use to hold society together. And if law is performing in the way it should perform, then there should be a limit to the yearning of the people for them to say they want a change, they want a change. And this change could either come through a violent means or a peaceful means. Although when we talk about revolution is always a violent means. It's always a violent one, in which the citizens demand that this is what we want and we must have it. That is what happens. So for us in this class, if there's anything we need to take home today, is how can our society be governed in such a way that there will be change, but not violent change, because Marxists, we say that those who make peaceful change impossible make violent change possible. We could have peaceful change in that, there are protests, like NSAS, the other protests, and bad governance, and the government listens to that yearning. And once the government listens to that yearning, what happens? When the government listens to that yearning, then you find that the society, will change. The government will affect the necessary change in the society. So I can see that quite a number of our colleagues are leaving. So we have about 21 minutes. Can we ask questions so that in the next 21 minutes, we can iron out some of the things that we're not clear about. So the floor is open for us to ask questions. Do we have questions? Please ask your questions, because this is really not an interactive class as I would have loved. So please ask your questions so that, because we are not likely to meet in person again before the exam. So please ask your questions.
Good morning, Ma.
Morning.
Okay, so I have a question. My
Go
question
ahead.
is, there are like some, I don't know, mechanisms in place in society. Like I heard of this thing they call vox pop, where they go around and ask
Vox
people.
Populi. Okay.
Yes, they go around and ask people for their opinions on what they think of government and stuff. So these things, I believe there is a way they are being noted by the lawmakers, and then in the lawmakers noting them, there should be a way for them to like take them to the house and deliberate on them. And once these things are done, I believe it should like to an extent deter revolution. So I don't know if my belief is right, or yeah, I don't know if you understand my question.
I think one of I'm not sure whether we have really embraced it in Nigeria, but I know that in the UK, oftentimes there's always things sent out for people to make comments on. And of course, the government do not turn blind eyes to all those things. Even in America, they don't turn blind eyes. And let me give you an example. The Canadian Prime Minister, to the surprise of a lot of people, has resigned, and has indicated he's stepping down. And so what happened? There have been hues and cries about the policies of the Liberal government, and because of the hues and cries on their policies, And then the deputy prime minister stepped down. Of course, you know, the prime minister too have now indicated that he also is stepping down. This is, you know, this is what happens where people listen, you know, and so they're asking for an election to be called so that a new government will come in. But in Nigeria, I think maybe Guardian or one other newspaper said that they conduct, but I don't know whether those findings are passed on, you know, to the relevant quarters. But those things are very necessary because it helps to gauge the mood of the citizens. You know, it helps to, because so you can know how your citizens, you can know how, you know, they feel. You know, you can know whether you know, they like what they've seen, you know. But I know that most times, well, I want to believe that I want to believe that somehow that maybe the government listens. I want to believe, because you find that they bring out a policy and there's so much noise against that policy, and you find that they're trying to make amends about the policy. So maybe it's working. I hope I've answered your question. Yes, Precious, go ahead.
Okay, good morning, Ma.
Morning.
Thank thank you very much for the class. So, on the point that there is a need for change in society, but it does not necessarily have to come through violent means. We could have discourses, we could have resolutions and dialogues in order to press our needs towards the government. Um, it is my own belief that this rests on the assumption that the government listens, as you have earlier stated. And I think that whenever this discourse arises, it is important that we situate it very well within the historical and our social standpoint as Nigerian. And if we take a look at the trajectory of Nigeria, what has made the government to act a lot of times on so many issues have really not been I don't want to call it the interviews that happen on the streets, but most times it has to do with when people have already started towing the path of violence, or there is this propensity to violence that you see that the government listens. And for me, I think this is down to one point. It is down to I think class stratification. That is, the leaders who should I say, preside over most matters in Nigeria are far removed or disillusioned from the reality of the average man on the street. And so, even when you write, even when you say a lot of things, they do not seem to understand these things because they do not face the harshness of this everyday reality. So, my point is that why peaceful why peaceful dialogue and all of these things is a necessity, because we do not want anarchy and chaos. But where all of this is not possible, and especially in the Nigerian sense, I think that I don't want to use violent means, but some sort like a middle ground is one of those best ways. And if you look at the examples of enterprise I cited, they're not exactly very great examples of when government listened, because that was actually not it wasn't peaceful. It was violent. A lot of people lost their lives, and it wasn't until it got very heated that the government started instituting an inquiry, despite there being a lot of claims from past, like, oh, maybe even 5 or 10 years before, people have been complaining about NSAS, and the government failed to do anything until there was some actual threat to maybe livelihood and maybe threatening the policy. That was when the government moved it. And I think there just has to be a middle ground. I do not think the whole roundtable thing works in Nigeria. That's just my opinion.
You see, Precious, the NSAS, if I remember, started peacefully. in fact, it's alleged, it's an allegation, I don't know, that it's governments who brought in talks to disperse them. And that's when it became bloody. And they gave examples of BRT people and BRT bosses, bringing people. So those are the issues. Because I've taken part in demonstrations in time past. And we start, university students normally start those demonstrations, and it starts peacefully until hoodlums, hooligans join and begin to burn and things like that, So, because society can never be static, that's given. We will always have change, but we don't need violent change. But when peaceful change is not made possible, that's when we have violent change, So I agree with your submission, but I also want you to also note that it's not in all cases that the protest is violent. No, we normally start with a peaceful, and then as alleged by people, the government will sponsor. Yes, let's use the word. Then the government will now sponsor people, and it is those people that will now cause mayhem, and the government will now be saying, but when we look at it, it's the government that brought those people into the scene, at least that has been said over, and government has not been able to extricate herself from what a majority of people have talked about, saying that, look, that protest was peaceful until BRT buses started dropping some people, So do we have other questions? We have 10 more minutes. Do we have people who are willing to ask questions again? We have 10 more minutes. Well, if no one is willing to ask questions, let me say here that it's impossible for the government to satisfy the needs of everybody. Or it's possible for the government to satisfy needs, but not wants, because our wants may be insatiable, but the government can satisfy the needs because they are basic needs that all citizens need in a society, and the government should be able to give those needs: electricity, energy, water, sanitation, proper layout, and education. Education is not a privilege, education is a right, and so on and so forth, So these are things, but when these things are not in place, that is when we begin to have issues. When those things are not in place, then begin to have issues. And so for us, the functionality of the law, the failure of law, but one also important thing is legitimation. Who legitimizes, who legitimizes is a question. And that's what we'll be looking at next Monday, when we will take all the, we'll go into the nitty-gritty of the topic, and then, God willing, we're going to finish topic 4 next week. Let me say here, the convocation does not disturb our own lecture because it's not physical. So we're going to have our lectures normally, convocation or no convocation. So in the absence of any question, I'm going to, okay, Opeyemi, go ahead. Maybe you
Sorry,
have the
ma.
floor. Yes,
Sorry, ma, to drag you back, ma.
it's
In
okay.
the last class, ma, you mentioned judicial antimonies, ma. And
Yes,
I just wanted to know, ma, like, can we say that judicial antimonies is the problems of justice in the Nigerian judicial
correct,
system, ma?
correct. You can say that. Can say
Uh,
that. Because when there are contradictions in decisions, when they are these courts of coordinate jurisdiction, they give decisions that are contrary. How do we explain it? You understand? How do we explain
yes,
those
yes, ma.
contradictions? So those
Yes,
are the issues we're having. So it's a good way to say that judicial antimonies, uh, it's one of those things that the society makes the average person to lose, to look at society and say, no, I don't think that law is what it should be. If most times when you talk to people about law, you find them say, look, and they will reel out some things to you, saying that if this is what it is, um, they aren't going to, be part of it, and you find that the lack of belief in law and in judiciary stems from antimonies, because when there is no certainty, because there must be certainty, and when there is no certainty, you find that most people will not believe, so they have zero tolerance, and I've talked about Mr. Blackburn. Mr. Blackburn is one of those people who really doesn't, and that's why he's always going to court, to challenge or to ask questions, about stuff. Do we agree to, have I communicated anything?
yes, yes, ma. Yes, ma.
Oh,
Thank you very much, ma.
okay. So does any other person have questions? We have 4 more minutes. Do we have questions? Please feel free to ask questions because we are not likely to meet physically. So this is the only time we have. And so please ask your questions and let's clarify. What I get from you is that most probably you don't even read before you come to class, and that for me is not good enough. If you don't read before you come to class, because if you read before you come to class, you should have questions. So we have 3 more minutes.
Good morning, ma.
Morning.
Okay, ma. So I don't really have a question about today, and seeing as nobody else is asking question, I want to use this opportunity to ask that when would we be having a test on this course, ma?
I think it's the person coming next that will be able to fix that. And because by that time we would have been able to would have almost completed the course outline, and that's when we can have a test. So I think it's the person coming after me will be able to fix the time for the text.
All right, ma.
Is
Thank
that
you very much, ma.
okay? So if we don't have any question, we have 2 more minutes to go. I will end the class if no one is asking any further question.